Is a jet really broken when it just forgets how to breathe? The hangar buzzed a nervous hum pressed against metal, and Pride then stopped, like a heart-skipping discipline. Hank Mercer set down his old green thermos, steam rising through the dust, and for a second the light shifted, touching the faded air wing patch on his sleeve. Still, the room held its breath, coffee scent, sunlight, silence, and the engine waited, listening for a calm hand. The hangar hummed with a noise that wasn't progress, just nerves and machinery failing to agree. A dozen engineers circled the silent jet, tapping screens, frowning at numbers that no longer moved. The Arizona sun cut through high windows, dragging long bars of dust across the floor. "Diagnostics can't be right," Evan Cole said, voice sharp enough to cut static. "We ran this sequence an hour ago. It worked." "Worked," someone muttered before you changed the throttle curve. He ignored it, adjusting his tablet, barking new commands. The console lights blinked, coughed once, then went still again. Silence rolled through the hangar. Even the old ceiling fan hesitated. Evan slapped the railing. "It's a software mismatch. Reboot it manually." A tech answered softly, "We did. Twice." The young lead exhaled, checked his watch, and looked toward the open bay doors, as if daylight might explain the failure. The jet, silver proud and absolutely lifeless, reflected nothing but dust. Then the door opened wider, and the noise forgot itself. No fanfare, no salute. Just footsteps, slow, measured, almost kind. Colonel Hank Mercer had the sort of posture you couldn't fake. 62, retired 10 years yet. He carried time like it owed him respect. The patch on his worn jacket, air wing faded to near gray, caught a blade of sunlight. He paused, letting his eyes trace the plane's outline the way a mechanic studies a pulse. He set a green thermos on the bench. Clink. A sound too soft for command, yet it turned every head. Evan's jaw tightened. "Sir, this is a restricted—" "Relax," Hank said quietly. "I'm just visiting." His voice was the kind of low that carried farther than shouting. It held dust radios and a little bit of wind from decades gone. Visiting, Evan repeated, crossing his arms. "We're mid-procedure." "I can see that," Hank replied. "How long's she been holding her breath?" The question floated for a moment. Someone from the back, half grinning, whispered, "He thinks coffee fixes everything." A few chuckles slipped out, relief disguised as humor. Hank poured a bit from the thermos into a tin cup, steam curling between them. Coffee helps when people forget patience. He stepped closer to the jet, not touching anything, just looking careful, deliberate, respectful. "You flew this model?" one of the younger engineers asked. "Something like it," he said. "Back when buttons had weight." The kid smiled. "Now they have bugs." Hank almost smiled back. Different kind of turbulence. Behind him, Evan folded his arms tighter. "Sir, unless you've got a new algorithm, I'd prefer you—" "Algorithms don't breathe," Hank said softly. The words landed heavier than expected. A few techs exchanged glances, not sure if it was criticism or wisdom. Outside wind pushed through the desert grass, and somewhere in the distance a service truck backfired, a tired heartbeat, echoing the jet's stillness. Hank set down his cup. "Let her rest for a second, then try again slower." Evan hesitated, caught between pride and permission. The old man didn't raise his voice, didn't demand authority. Yet the entire hangar waited. Someone finally moved a finger, pressed the reset. Lights flickered, hesitated, then glowed steady amber. Not a full heartbeat, but close. Hank nodded once, almost to himself. "See, sometimes the problem's not the engine." The hangar smelled of burnt coffee and overheated circuits. Screens flickered, voices overlapped, and pride filled the air thicker than fuel. Modern calibration doesn't use those antique dials, Evan snapped, pointing at the board. We're running diagnostics through adaptive sensors now. Across from him, an older engineer muttered, "And yet she's still not moving." The words cut through the chatter. Someone coughed. Someone else looked away. Hank Mercer stayed a few steps back, silent as a photograph in a dusty frame. His eyes tracked the panel lights, measuring patience by seconds. The hum underfoot sounded more nervous than mechanical. Riley Tran, the youngest in the group, 23, sharp as a fresh screw, leaned closer to the jet's console, glancing at the old man. "You sure that manual isn't from Vietnam?" The line landed with a ripple of laughter. Evan smirked. "Don't mind him, Colonel. We're just trying to keep things 21st century." Hank's gaze didn't move. He only said coffee's older than the jet, but it still works every morning. The room paused, caught between amusement and guilt. Riley's grin softened first. Evan turned back to the board. "We've got data lag, half a second delay, and throttle feedback. Maybe it's the sync pulse," Riley offered. "Maybe it's operator error," Evan shot back. Riley raised his hands, smiling small. "Just saying, boss." Behind them, Hank reached for one of the side gauges, fingers tracing the worn metal like it was a familiar line of scripture. He didn't twist, didn't intrude, just felt the dial's resistance. The humming changed pitch, barely, subtle as a breath. No one noticed except Riley. She turned her head slightly. "Did you?" Hank's eyes flicked toward her. "Listen to the sound, not the readout." Riley frowned, leaning closer to the engine casing. "Sounds like static." "Static's what you get when two signals forget to listen to each other," Hank said quietly. His words weren't instruction, but they hung in the air like one. Riley caught movement, a binder half tucked under a toolbox. The cover read, "Field Maintenance 2002, its corners soft and edges browned with time." She pulled it open. Inside, neat handwriting crawled along the margins, small notes in pencil, "Check valves before logic fails. Trust the ear before the code." Evan glanced over. "What's that?" "Something prehistoric," Riley joked, flipping a page. "But it's detailed." Hank looked up from the console. "That manual saved a squadron once." "You wrote in it?" she asked. He nodded once, then returned to the dial. "Back when we fixed things with both hands." Silence stretched for a breath. Evan sighed. "Okay, Colonel. You've got history, I'll give you that. But history doesn't run diagnostics." Hank smiled faintly. "Neither does pride." No one laughed this time. The line hit like a level gauge, finding balance. The hum steadied deeper now, as if the machine was listening too. Riley bent closer, whispering. "What did you touch?" "Just pressure, trim," Hank said. "It's like talking to a tired horse, you whisper first." The younger engineer blinked, half smiling. "We don't teach that." "Maybe you should." A few others shifted, glancing at each other, unsure whether to write that down or ignore it completely. Riley didn't move. Her eyes followed the slow, disciplined turn of his wrist as he adjusted another knob. The fluorescent lights flickered. A low hum returned, smooth this time, filling the silence. The hangar looked different after hours, emptier, almost reverent. The echoes of the day had faded into soft static from a radio perched on a shelf. A local host's voice floated through the quiet, low and careful. "Tomorrow's the annual Veterans Day Memorial flyover. Skies clear over Yuma, Arizona. We'll be remembering the pilots who never came home." The words hung in the air like dust motes in lamplight. Hank Mercer sat beneath that same light, reading from a dog-eared manual that looked older than most of the staff. His glasses balanced low on his nose, and every few lines he traced a margin note with a grease-stained thumb, as though reacquainting himself with an old friend. The hum of a cooling fan filled the space. Then a softer sound, the scuff of boots. "Didn't mean to interrupt," Riley said quietly from the doorway. "You didn't," Hank replied, not looking up. "Noise and interruption aren't the same thing." She stepped closer, folding her arms. "Everyone's gone home. Even Evan." He nodded, closing the manual halfway. "Good. Now the jet can finally think." Riley smiled faintly. "You talk about it like it's alive." "It is," Hank said, voice warm and patient. "Anything built with hands remembers how to breathe if you listen close enough." She hesitated, guilt catching in her throat. "About earlier, I shouldn't have joked about Vietnam." Hank waved it off gently. "Kid, I've been called worse by better pilots. You learn to let the air out of a moment before it explodes." Riley exhaled, relieved. "You ever miss it flying, I mean?" He leaned back the chair, creaking softly. "Sometimes. But it's the quiet I miss most, the moment before takeoff when everyone's holding their breath together." That silence had purpose. He looked at her, then eyes steady but kind. "Arguing wastes air. Listening keeps engines alive." Riley moved closer, drawn by that simple gravity. Hank stood, walked toward the silver hull, and placed a hand against it. "Try it," he said. She hesitated, then mirrored the motion. The metal was cold at first, then oddly warm. "Close your eyes," he murmured. She obeyed. "Now tell me what you hear." There was a faint hiss, the soft hum of residual current, the metallic sigh of cooling panels like a tired exhale. "Static," she said. "Machines breathe too," Hank replied. "They just speak quieter than people." The radio in the background played a somber brass arrangement, trumpets echoing in a way that made the hangar seem like a church. Riley opened her eyes. "I don't get it. The readings still say it's dead." Hank smiled. "It's not broken, just misheard." He tapped the side of the manual. "Sometimes the issue isn't the engine or the data, it's how we ask the question." She tilted her head. "So what's the question here?" He looked back at the jet. Whether anyone still trusts what can't be measured. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was weightless, like the kind that makes a person stand taller. Riley finally said, "Evan's not gonna like this." "He doesn't have to," Hank answered. "He just has to see it work." The radio host's voice drifted again. "Tomorrow morning, 0900 hours, the flyover will begin. A salute to those who taught us how to steady the sky." The lamplight flickered. Somewhere on the control panel, a tiny bulb blinked once. Riley noticed it first. "Wait, did you see?" Hank's smiled eyes still on the jet. Then the panel light blinked once, like the hangar was holding its breath. The hangar returned to life before sunrise, buzzing with caffeine nerves and the faint tang of jet fuel that refused to fade. The restart trial had been moved up against recommendation. Evan wanted control back, and control demanded spectacle. "Status check," he barked, eyes glued to the monitor wall. "Telemetry green across all feeds. We go live in 60. Riley stood near the panel manual, still tucked under her arm. Her voice carried a note of warning. "Sir, we haven't run the final sync." "It's fine," Evan snapped. "We've lost 2 days already." Hank Mercer watched from the corner posture, easy coffee thermos in one hand. He hadn't been asked to attend, but nobody told him to leave either. The younger crew treated him like a superstition, half respected, half outdated. At 0 mark, the hangar filled with static hum. Lights blinked, flickered, then steadied into anxious rhythm. "Throttle up to 10%, Evan ordered. The jet groaned, metal expanding under stress. A deep whine built, stuttered, and collapsed. Sensor drop 1 tech shouted. Control loops desyncing, reboot. The sequence, Evans said, jaw tightening. Already did. The readings spiked, then flatlined. A hush spread through the room, a collective intake of breath that no one exhaled. Hank's voice broke the silence, calm as morning radio. Mind if I try? Evan turned half in disbelief. Sir, with all due respect, I'll take that as permission, Hank said, stepping forward. He set the thermos on the console. The gesture was unhurried, quiet, yet somehow it pressed reset on every ego in the room. Even the hum of machinery seemed to listen. He leaned toward the panel ear near the control vent, hand hovering just above the manual valve. Not loud, he murmured. She's waiting for rhythm, not pressure, Riley whispered. What's he doing? Listening, Hank said simply. Then came the SM Lock Plus moment. The hangar wasn't loud, it was slammed by protocol, then quieted by discipline. The phrase wasn't heard so much as felt. The air itself seemed to fold under its weight. Engineers froze not from command, but from recognition. Hank twisted the valve half a turn. A hiss replied, steady, measured. He tapped the side of the console twice, like knocking on an old door. Throttle 3%, he said. Riley obeyed. The engine coughed once, twice, then caught. The fans spun with hesitant rhythm, fluttering between silence and song. Hold, Hank said. A long second passed. Then, like breath, remembered the whir smoothed into a clean, confident hum. No one spoke. The jet wasn't roaring. It was alive in a quieter way, steady and dignified. Every light on the panel glowed amber, not red. Riley's eyes widened. It's holding. Evan stared at the monitors, disbelief bleeding into relief. What did you? Stopped shouting, Hank said. Engines don't respond to panic. The line carried the finality of scripture. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then applause started, not loud, but sincere, like rain on tin. Riley met Hank's eyes across the hangar. A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, the moment of transfer of trust sealed without ceremony. Hank didn't smile back, but his nod said enough. Evan rubbed the back of his neck. You made me look like a fool. Hank shook his head. You made yourself look like a leader who learns. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't judgment either. Just balance. The air felt lighter. Even the hum from the engine softened into something almost human, a rhythm older than circuits. Riley walked closer, voice low. You always knew it'd work. Didn't know, Hank said. Just believed it should. She looked toward the glowing console. Feels different now. Because it's listening, he said. And so are you. The faint sound of the radio crackled again in the background, a replay of the Veterans Day coverage still looping on static delay. Trumpets bled faintly through the interference, merging with the engine's hum, until the two sounds became one. The morning rose soft over the airfield sunlight, washing the hangar roofs gold. Dew glimmered on the chain-link fence as the town began to gather mechanics, veterans, school kids, even the librarian carrying a tray of muffins. The jet sat at the edge of the tarmac, quiet but alive like an old song, waiting for the next verse. The radio van parked beside the crowd antenna, raised speakers crackling with the same calm voice from the night before. Live from Ashland Field on Veterans Day morning, the test flight continues today. Locals say the sound itself feels different this time, steadier. Riley Tran adjusted her camera phone, glancing toward Hank Mercer, who stood near the hangar doors, thermos in hand. Evan was beside him, hands jammed in pockets, eyes humbled, but not bitter. Guess we just needed less noise, Evan said quietly. Hank nodded once. Most fixes do. The two men stood in the kind of silence that didn't need repair. Engines idled. A soft hum rose, a sound no longer anxious but patient. The machine had learned its lesson, and so had they. The vibration rolled across the crowd, not sharp, not showy, just even and sure, like breath through a brass instrument. Riley smiled at the sound, then turned toward the library courtyard, where a temporary board had been set up beside the steps. She pinned the old manual, Hank's manual, to it. The penciled notes were visible under the morning light, right beside a poster that read, "Quiet hands make safe work." Children stared at the display, curious. A teacher explained what manual trim meant. Someone clapped softly. By sunset, the hangar was nearly empty, but the air still carried the hum of something finished right. The plaque on the engine caught the last orange light, its edges glowing like a small promise kept. Veterans lingered by the fence hands, in pockets, listening not to the machine, but to the hush it left behind. He ran a finger across the metal feeling, where work ended and memory began. Quiet's not the absence of sound, he thought, it's the proof that someone cared enough to listen. The wind moved through the open door, brushing dust from the floor in gentle spirals. Still, a single prop blade turned once, as if nodding at the day. Then the hangar exhaled. The plaque gleamed softly, restarted by a calm hand. At the coffee trailer, a small group of veterans raised their cups. No cheers, no words, just a slow, silent salute in Hank's direction. He noticed, of course, but looked away, pretending to study the ground. Riley nudged him gently. "You know that was for you, right?" He exhaled, smiling faintly. For anyone who ever learned the hard way. The hum of the jet deepened, catching the breeze. The crowd instinctively grew quiet, as if the town itself remembered what listening felt like. Colonel Evans said after a long pause, "We're going to submit the footage to the oversight office. The restart procedure. It's your signature, not mine." Hank shook his head. "It's ours. Just make sure the kid gets credit." "Kid?" Riley asked, half laughing. He tilted his head toward her. "You're the one who stayed to listen." She laughed softly. "Guess calm's contagious, you know." Evan chuckled at that, shoulders finally uncoiling. From the library loudspeaker, the announcer's voice came again. "As the jet completes its ground run, Ashland Field honors all who served by teaching us that quiet isn't weakness, it's precision." The words echoed through the courtyard. People stood taller without knowing why. Riley pressed her palm against the library board just beneath the manual. The grease smudge Hank had left there yesterday still marked the corner of the page. It felt less like a stain and more like a signature. "Feels different now," she murmured. Hank answered, because everyone finally stopped trying to be the loudest in the room. The jet's hum settled into a steady drone, warm and even. The hangar felt like a chapel by evening. The last light stretched long across the floor, painting the concrete in amber streaks. The air was warm, still scented faintly of fuel and coffee. A small crowd stood near the far wall where the jet rested, clean, quiet, unarmed by noise or pride. On its engine casing, a new plaque gleamed beneath a velvet cover. When Riley pulled the cloth away, the metal caught the sunset perfectly. "Restarted by a calm hand, Colonel H. Mercer Rhett." The words were simple, but the silence that followed them carried weight. Evan spoke first, voice soft. "Didn't think a line that short could hit this hard." Riley smiled. "Sometimes the short ones say the most." She turned to Hank, who stood a few paces back, hat in hand. His eyes followed the lettering without pride, only patience. "You didn't just fix the jet," Riley said quietly. "You fixed us." Hank shook his head. "It wasn't me. It was the quiet." The line lingered, the kind that would replay in someone's mind hours later, long after the sound had faded. The radio from the maintenance bench clicked on the same local station, still looping its Veterans Day broadcast. A soft choir hummed over the static, an old hymn that didn't ask for applause. Light glinted off the old air wing patch on Hank's jacket, landing squarely on the plaque beside it. The reflection made the two metals, worn fabric and polished brass, seem part of the same design, a bridge between past and present. Riley caught the glow, whispering, "That's perfect." Hank adjusted the patch absently. "Just alignment. Everything's about alignment." She smiled. "And listening." He nodded. "That too." For a long moment, no one spoke. The hum of the jet's test systems rolled once faintly, like the engine remembered what calm felt like. A single propeller blade turned a half rotation, then stopped, catching the last slice of sunlight. Riley stepped back, taking it all in: the plaque, the reflection, the quiet. "Guess the Colonel did restart it after all," she said softly. Hank chuckled low. "Restarted, sure, but not by command." By what then? By a calm hand. The phrase settled into the stillness, completing the loop of the story, tying title to truth. Evan approached from behind, holding 2 paper cups. Coffee. Hank accepted one with a nod. "Still fixes everything." Riley laughed under her breath. "Told you it's contagious." They stood there together as the choir hum carried through the open hangar doors. Outside, the town was winding down, the library lights flickering off the veterans' trailer, packing up the airfield flags, bowing gently in the dusk. The horizon burned gold for a heartbeat longer, then dimmed. Wind moved across the tarmac, brushing the edges of the plaque. The reflection of the engraved words shimmered briefly: "Started jet, Colonel," locked together in one frame of fading light. Then the sound slipped into stillness, like a prayer finished but not forgotten.